Thank you very much, sir. And Madam, over to you for the next.
Thank you so very much to the COP30 presidency for opening the CEO Caucus, which aims to build a high-level platform for private sector leaders, innovators, and financiers to collaborate with governments and institutions. Digital is, I always get a tongue twister with that word. Digitalization can be a game changer for the energy sector and to the energy transition process, improving grid reliability, enabling smart energy management, and driving the integration of solar technologies across sectors. Through real-time data, predictive analytics, and innovative digital platforms, developing countries can leapfrog legacy infrastructure and design clean, decentralized energy systems that are both cost-effective and climate smart. So today's discussion will further explore how this initiative can be tailored to meet the needs of LAC countries and help mobilize digital and AI-based solutions across the region's solar value chain. So to take this agenda forward, I now invite the DG of the International Solar Alliance to proceed. So DG, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think the best form of discussing about private sector is by private sector CEOs themselves. As you heard us in my own vision speech, but also the Honorable Minister from Chile, whichever country has gone by leaps and bounds on solar, it's all by private sector. And what is very interesting, as you heard the COP30 presidency and the address in the SIDS, the intersection of digitization and energy will be one of the defining trends for the next 5-10 years. So I'm really looking forward to a vibrant discussion to be led by the private sector CEOs. So I'm going to hand over to Karan, who will integrate with more than 10 private sector CEOs we already have amongst us in the table. Let us hear from them. What will it take for private sector to invest in LATAM, and what are the trends? So over to you, Karan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And as DG mentioned, the ISA launched the CEO Caucus, a high-level forum designed to bring together senior industry representatives to exchange ideas, network, and contribute to this global advancement of solar energy. This initiative was launched in 2024, and which focused on developing a diversified and resilient global supply chain, enabling access to technology, mobilizing capital, and creating an enabling policy environment. Today, I'm happy to be joined by senior industry leaders from this region, as well as intergovernmental and international organizations. Today's themes will focus on grid integration and infrastructure bottlenecks in the region, the role storage and other allied sectors can play in scaling up solar in the region, regulatory, environment, supply security and scalability of critical minerals, energy security, local value chains, and most importantly, area that ISA is getting into deeply is on digitalization and AI, both of which are growing in role in the region. Brazil and Chile, both deploying AI-powered forecasting tools, digital twins, and advanced monitoring systems to optimize performance. And I hope that these are some things that are put out in the discussion too. Let me invite our moderator for today, Ian Kenchington from the Becquerel Institute, to take us forward. Also, logistically, I would like all of you to divert your attention to my right, where all our panelists are in the row just behind the ministers. Ian, over to you.
Good morning, all. Thank you for your patience so far down into the day. I'm going to start briefly by asking the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Just state your name and from which part of the PV solar and green transition ecosystem you come from. Just like I, Ian Kensington, come from the PV economics analysis part. So I hand the microphone to you for a brief introduction so we can.
Okay, yeah, that works. So, good evening, everybody. My name is David Rau. I am the CEO of Copec Flux, which is Copec is traditionally a gasoline distribution company here in Chile, and diversifying today their value chain into especially new energies, electromobility, and convenience.
Hi. Hi, my name is Felipe Valencia. I am the CTO of Atamos Tech. Atamos Tech is a corporation that is dedicated to the development of technological solutions for the solar sector. And we typically cover from the module design until the design of digital tools for asset management and operation and maintenance of solar power plants.
Thank you very much. My name is Alejandro Angeli. I am the director, the commercial director of Revergy. Revergy is a Spanish ISP. We have three areas of our expertise, which is operation and maintenance of solar, eolic, and BESS. We have the asset management area as well as the engineering services within the Latin American region. In the Latin American region, we're currently in Peru, the Dominican Republic, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and we are expanding to more countries in the Caribbean in the next 18 months. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Darío Morales. I'm here representing two institutions. First, ACESOL, which is the Chilean Association for Solar Energy. We are a trade association gathering together over 170 companies that works in the whole value chain of solar energy in Chile. And also, I'm on behalf of the Global Solar Council. I'm a member of the board of the Global Solar Council, and I bring to you the regards of Rodrigo Zaguaya, chairman of the board, and Sonia Dunlop, the executive director of Global Solar Council. So very happy to be here with you and to share some thoughts about solar energy and digitalization.
Hello again, my name is Judith Ephraim-Schmidt. I am the Program Director for Sustainable Energy at the Organization of Eastern Caribbean, OECS Commission. At the OECS, a lot of the work that we do on solar revolves around policy, looking at both regional policy as well as supporting our member states with their national energy policies pertaining to solar. But as you can imagine, policy covers a range of other issues. And so we look at not just regulations, but capacity building, involvement of the private sector, and standards. We also have a role in coordinating and ensuring that all the energy stakeholders, all the solar stakeholders, their best interests are addressed.
Good morning. I'm Georgiana Braga Oriar. I'm representative of the United Nations Development Program here in Chile. And I'm also representing today our administrator, Haoliang Xu. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And obviously, we look into the energy sector with a lens of development, of inclusive and sustainable development.
Very much. Now that we know you're here and the microphones work properly. Latin America's rapid solar deployment, it's outpacing grid upgrades. Weak transmission infrastructure, curtailment issues, and lack of sometimes regional interconnection hinder the full utilization of our solar resources. I would like to start the conversation by asking you, how can countries modernize grids to manage this rapid solar growth? Or conversely, which models of regional interconnection or cross-border electricity trading are currently feasible within our hands?
Right. Definitely, this is a really broad question, but I will try to push some thoughts about that. First of all, the smart grids are. Sorry. Yep.
Can hear you.
All right. smart grids, this is something that needs to be deployed in, I know that this is quite hard to be deployed in each and every country, but we have some examples where smart grids can help in order to stabilize the grid as a whole. It's not only that it's a bilateral grid in which the grid itself provides energy, but also takes data and can reduce and adjust the distribution when it is needed. The good thing about that, the bad thing is that it needs additional infrastructure. The good thing is that it's usable maybe 70 to 85% of the currently infrastructure can be used. Another thought that might be taken into a place is not only thinking into each and every country as an individual, but also taking examples as Argentina, Chile, and Peru. How can we regionalize the grids, but not only thinking about Argentina, Chile, and Peru, maybe as a region as a whole. Maybe you have.
Regarding grids, I think that we have to think about two different kind of infrastructure. One is transmission infrastructure. What have happened in most of the countries with a high rate of penetration of renewables is that building new generation infrastructure is much faster than building new transmission infrastructure. So every country is facing challenges in terms of congestions of transmissions, power lines, and most of these bottlenecks has as consequence the reduction of benefits of new solar energy. So in this case, in order to make a better use of these transmission power lines, technology is key. When we talk about this, we have to interconnect digitally several different new users of the power grid. And also, cybersecurity is an issue that has to be addressed. Because when you have, when the energy supply of a country depends on digital and communication infrastructure, cybersecurity, it's key for not only for economic, but also for strategic reasons. The second grid is the distribution grid. When we talk about rooftop solar, commercial industrial solar, now suddenly we are facing not thousands, but perhaps millions of new users interacting with the distribution grid. Users that before they were only used to consume energy, but now they are also producing energy. And someday, I hope, we are going to have the massive inclusion of electric vehicles, which in electrical terms are moving energy storage systems all through the grids. And in order to control and to provide efficient, sustainable, and reliable energy supply, we are going to be we will have to be able to coordinate thousands and millions of new users, and doing so without communications, without technology of information, but above all, without artificial intelligence, in my opinion, it's going to be impossible. And we have to move forward into that direction, because otherwise we won't be able to transfer the benefits of solar energy to the local population, which is, in my opinion, the final goal.
May I ask you to drill down in a very specific topic? I'm addressing your comment, but everyone's invited to chime in for this, because you mentioned that, yeah, we have the challenge of like this great dearth of data that we need to manage smart with technology, but you also mentioned that currently the connections creates a bottleneck. Can you expand on how is this bottleneck produced, that it's becoming something slower than actual solar deployment? Just understand, how does it happen? How does it become a bottleneck?
Yes, in the case of Chile, this is our particular case, but this situation It can happen in many other countries as well. In the case of Chile, the desert of Atacama is the place in the world with the best solar radiation. So it's natural, and because economic efficiency, almost all the PV power plants are installed there. We've got almost 11 gigawatts of installed capacity, and 8 gigawatts are installed in the Atacama Desert. Building a PV power plant, a large-scale PV power plant, may take a couple of years, 2-3 years maximum. We don't have much social conflicts because we are in the middle of the desert, and we don't have many problems with permitting and so on. However, the Atacama Desert, it's 2,000 kilometers away from Santiago. And in Santiago is where almost 1/3 of the population lives, and almost 40% of the energy demand. So we must bring that energy from 2,000 kilometers up north to the central part of the country. And to build a transmission power line, it may take up to 5, 6, 7 years minimum. And you are going to have lots of social conflicts because the power line will have to go through different private and public land, environmental issues, and so on. So the speed of installing generation infrastructure versus the speed of building transmission and grid infrastructure, it produces this bottleneck.
Yeah, thanks. Just to complement a bit, let's say what I see in different countries, not only in Latin America, but also in Europe, is that typically the operation and the planning of the power grids is done considering just the generation infrastructure or the transmission infrastructure. And with the deployment or the rising in the use of the solar energy, then splitting the problem of planning the power grids in generation or transmission is no longer something, let's say, valid, because the aspect that mentioned Dario, the putting in operation a solar power plant is not like putting in operation a hydropower plant or a thermal power plant. So in this sense, the generation is growing faster and the transmission infrastructure is getting with a lag. So there is a bottleneck in that. And the other thing is that something have to change also. The mindset of power engineers is like big power plants, big transmission infrastructure, and then put to get or to take the energy from the generation to the demand centers. But with solar and with sun and with wind, we have some other aspect that can be exploited. Let's say solar is decentralized by nature, so you can take the demand and the generation closer, and in this sense you can think about energy territories, and in this way you make the power system more reliable, more flexible, and in fact you can just use the current transmission infrastructure just for exchange of energy between the energy territories, instead of making lots of transmission lines which are very slow for deployment and which are not necessarily flexible enough and resilient enough.
Yeah, I do have.
Okay.
I mean, the ladies here raised their hands a long ago.
I mean,
Please.
go.
Yeah, just wanted to continue on the conversation from the last speaker from a Caribbean perspective, a small island perspective, I think it's really important for there to be some joint planning when it comes to solar between the utilities who normally own the grids and the government planning agencies. It's important so that, you know, they're well aligned in terms of timelines, in terms of demand, and so those associated strengthening measures can be done to accommodate for the expected plans that government and other projects may bring on board. But something that is also very critical to us as islands is the whole issue, not just of modernization, but of resilience. For us, we are quite vulnerable to hurricanes, and as we continue to expand our sustainable energy and particularly solar space, we want to ensure that the grids and all the infrastructure that supports that have the built-in resilience so that we are not disadvantaged in any way during periods of hurricanes or other disasters that may compromise the integrity of our electricity supply.
Go ahead, and then.
Okay, then before you twist, yeah, first of all, in getting back a little bit, because obviously it's very different when we talk about a continent or when we talk about island. The issues, the problems, and the opportunities are quite different. But getting back to Chile and Latin America especially, first of all, I think we were still discussing whether we actually need or not transmission line and infrastructure. I think we will have to get to the point where we basically take it as a necessity that we have. When we want to expand on renewable energy, we will need infrastructure that's interconnected, not only in your country, like in Chile. You have to interconnect the continent in order to really make an efficient use of the different resources that you got in every country, like, for example, in Chile, the solar energy. So I think that's one of the, and then we have it's not really an energy problem that we are facing in terms of the regulatory framework, in terms of speed of administrational work. The technology is changing, and the innovation is way faster than it was 5 years ago, and it will be the double of the speed next year, possibly. And I think we will get to the point where we have to understand that traditional politics will not be able to move at that speed. So we have to find different frameworks. How can we still maintain control and a good regulatory framework, but also enabling innovation, enabling the speed of new technology, enabling AI, and that's, I think, a very, very difficult task. And I think one of the ideas in that way is simply getting to the right incentives. We are talking a lot about the laws in Chile, for example, but just and protecting the energy price, but just simply giving the end users and price incentives. So in Chile, it's still, so just for a lot of people, they may not know, but in Chile, for example, we have often a stable price for our clients the whole day, but there's not during the whole day the same energy available. So just simply creating the correct incentives for the end users, they will adapt. They will use energy when it's cheaper in the grid. They will adapt in terms of, which basically helps also to fight against these bottlenecks, and enabling the end user to participate actively in the use of electricity. I think that's one of the big opportunities that we got.
Thank you for this opinion. And before I move to the issue that Judith has raised about the security, I wanted to piggyback on this and follow up with this. We have to keep in mind that the American continent has not one language, has not one political system, has not one grid. It has a myriad of different political and regulatory frameworks, and that sometimes creates some uncertainty towards investors. What would you think that at a private level or at a governmental level has the potential to really provide this certainty to ensure that the private world can safely invest regardless of potential political or geopolitical shifts that might come? Do you have any idea or 2 cents on this subject?
Maybe I chip in a little bit here. No, I was going to mention we're talking about infrastructure, grid connections, weak interconnections. No, we see in Latin America normally an average grid project timeline that it's more than 6 and 7 years. We see, for example, I have some numbers for Colombia. Colombia, 55% of the transmission projects are delayed, and this affects all of the structure. But I wanted to put a twist here on focusing on people. And I think in focusing on the consumers. We heard Minister Pardo this morning speaking of the impacts on price for people. No, all the investment that that Chile has made has impacted that it's actually very expensive energy here. So if you go in these cold days to the south or to some villages in the south of Chile, for example, you're going to see fog or smog of people heating their houses with wood because they won't be able to afford it. It's very expensive, of kerosene, because it's very expensive to be heating their houses with any other clean energy. So I think that we still need to twist the focus and put on people. No, today, over 600 million people still lack electricity. Over 2 billion people depend on polluting cooking fuels. Over 1 billion people live with unreliable and unaffordable energy access. And we need to really focus on the consumer. And people that we be able to pay, because it doesn't matter what is the government that's there. If it's affordable, people will be supporting it. But what we are seeing is also with polarization and different infrastructures, you put some investment one day, you put some incentive one day, next government change the investment, change the incentive, and not focusing on people. And I think this is really something that is important to, again, think of building this infrastructure, thinking about people, not just projects. Building also the labor market around the critical minerals, around this infrastructure. When we see in Chile that you have 2,000 kilometers of grids, and most of the land here in Chile is already private. You don't have public land in this. How are you going to connect this for people? So it really, you need to put the projects close to where people are more than the other way around. Thank you.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. In my opinion, that's an excellent way to see things in terms of strategic development of solar energy and renewable energy in general. Currently, Chile is facing one of the highest electricity tariff in the world. And it's because we don't have fossil fuels in our territory. We must bring natural gas and coal from all over the world. There's an analysis from the University of Chile that recently they reported that if we haven't had this amazing renewable energy development in the last 10 years, electricity prices would be much higher than today. So that's something that is important to take into account, because sometimes renewables are moving forward to renewables and moving forward to solar. It's a strategic decision, not only for strategic independence on geopolitical issues, but also thinking about a tariff. I also agree with the fact that even though we have to promote the expansion of transmission lines and transmission power lines, as I said before in my previous intervention, I think that it's also important to promote distributed generation. Most of our member companies are in the business of distributed generation because it makes sense, or it doesn't make much sense if we've got energy that can be produced near to where that energy is consumed, to produce that energy anywhere else. Just an example, Germany has almost 60 or 65% of its solar capacity is in distributed generation. And the place with more solar radiation in Germany has the same solar radiation that the southern part of Chile, 1,000 kilometers south from Santiago. So we have a huge potential to produce solar energy near where the consumptions are. For example, if we promote the installation of solar rooftop only in the metropolitan region of Santiago, the energy produced will be enough to supply 20% of the country's electricity needs. So that's a huge potential. And if we do so, we are going to avoid the necessity to build, or we're going to delay the necessity of building new transmission infrastructure. And finally, what Minister Pardo said this morning, I totally agree with him when he says that when you subsidize people for energy tariff, that people will receive the benefits as long as you transfer the money. On the other hand, if you subsidize or if you promote solar rooftops, you will see that the benefits will stay much longer once the money is gone. So that's I think it's a very important issue to take into account.
Indeed, as you say, this is a type of electricity that it's a one-off. You invest and then you reap the results with the provided operation and maintenance. And solar energy is currently positioned as a main engine of energy access democratization and to bring local value for the people who are actually working in this. But that also allows you to address the issue of the local reality of each one. There are different types of energy, and sometimes it's solar and sometimes it's wind. But there's also the threat, as Judith mentioned, the threat of the climate events, weather events that may happen. And I would like you to if you could give me a bit of an insight of how do you address, from a clean transition, from a clean energy standpoint, democratization of the energy, but also protecting the people from losing their energy in front of weather events? How do you create this resilience towards weather?
So that's one of the hardest questions might be. And here we are with different countries that have a lot of that issue. This is one of the biggest issues in order to boost their investments on solar, for example. We need to take into account that this is something that it's inherited by each of those countries. And we not only need to work or to see solar or wind production as a separate investment, but we also need to see other alternatives. And we've been discussing here in Chile of BESS, of the battery energy storage for the last maybe 2 years, and it's growing a lot here, maybe as to try to remediate the curtailment. But this solution, the battery storage, can be a solution also for islands where they currently have, they're not quite stable if they deployed full solar or full wind, because they're only going to have it during the day, and then these fluctuations is going to actually not help the grid as a whole. But battery storage can actually bring this stability throughout the day, throughout the year. And on top of that, higher investment on stronger, more reliable solar farms, both in utility and in distribution, can lead to tackle all those climate issues that they might happen. Tornadoes are going to keep on happening, and there is nothing that we can do about it, but we can protect our investment by doing such things.
Yes, I think for us, it really is a balancing act, because we want to build in the resilience, but we want to keep the technologies at a cost that does not raise the tariffs for the consumer at the end of the day. And so when we think of standards in terms of the installation, when we think of insurance, when we think of those measures, the batteries, we have to find solutions that allow us to keep the costs at an affordable rate so that everybody can actually benefit. And this is why I think there are some benefits that we need to consider from pool procurement and ensuring that we have regional approaches so that we can leverage those benefits that come with those reduced costs from the pool procurement. That will, of course, necessitate having some serious discussions and decisions on working together, real active collaboration. We need to be looking at standards across the board. We need to be looking at harmonization of regulations, of policies, of standards. And we need to have framework agreements that allow us to be able to undertake these things very efficiently. I think that there are some models around that we can look and see how we can modify for our region, but certainly we need to be innovative and we need to be cooperative in ensuring that whilst we build the resilience, our costs remain affordable for us.
Thanks. Yeah, when we talk about resilience, we normally talk about flexibility and talk about diversification. So thinking that different territories have different energy requirements, but also different energy sources, we have to make our energy systems more diverse, taking into consideration these aspects. And also, the other point is that we have to identify the synergies among the sources, among the demand centers, and finally, the synergy that can arise from the definition of energy territories, because in this sense, some complements can be identified and can be exploited and making our energy system more flexible and more diverse. And in this sense, if you have some extreme weather or some other events of low probability but with high impact, you can tackle the effects of that because you have enough flexibility and diversity on the sources. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Just to give a little background, our company, Caucus, we are working the complete value chain from residential solutions, commercial solutions, and generation projects. So we have a very interesting insight. And when I think we all agree that solar plus battery obviously is a very good sign for resilience. In Chile, we have the very nice situation that battery plus solar is already more competitive than the grid itself. I think Chile, we always had, because of the high solar radiation, it's a very nice place to do solar energy, actually. But the challenges, they remain. Today, I think normally if you have a developed solar market, you have financing schemes that enable your monthly installments being lower than the actual savings that you can achieve. That's probably the easy part of it. And when you manage that, then the next question is, okay, so how do I get the solar system to really actually work with the correct efficiency during 20 years? Because one is giving the paperwork where you say it's 20 years. The other thing is that it's really working 20 years, which is normally not that easy as it sounds. So yeah, actually, and the interesting thing in Chile, and it's a very good pilot project in the terms, is because we are getting down the payment, the payback time in Chile. I think today we are talking about 6 to 6 years, which is actually the guarantee that you get for the solar equipment. So then that is really when you're getting into a moment where it's really game changing, because you can get the resilience, you can give the power to the clients and the consumers and still maintaining a lower price. But I think that is really, it's something we will get there everywhere on the world. Solar energy will still continue to go down. Batteries will go down in price also. So that's what we are going to, where we are heading to. But I think the next question after financing is how can we guarantee to the client, to the final users, that the solar systems are really working during their lifetime? Because we can see, for example, in the United States that they're having huge problems today because of the explosion of solar residential and now a lot of quality issues. So I think that's the topic that we have to tackle right now in terms of of really making it something useful for the client, consumer.
Back on it, to take it just on an optimistic note, as you mentioned, that battery systems have been like a privileged child here in Chile that has managed to lower the prices. What do you think are being the main drivers here in Chile that have enabled the proper deployment of batteries that could be in turn replicated in other territories?
Definitely the grid outtake that we had. Everybody saw that it's a possibility not to have electricity at your house. So in Chile, it's actually, to be quite honest and talking serious, it's because it's relatively common to not have electricity in your house. So since the last blackout, I think the sales in batteries rose like 100% or even more. Today, residential, it's more or less 25% of all solar installations include battery already. Considering the prices that we are seeing today, which next year will be different. But it's really, I think, in Chile, it's still a lot of backup considerations, not only economic.
Natural necessity. That
resilience necessity.
Just in tandem with solar deployment.
Yes, definitely. I would say so. I don't know.
Segues into a different topic, which is this super cutthroat competitivity towards lowering the prices that have managed to get solar plus batteries into the state that they're in as the most competitive cost. That has also raised a conversation about what happens with the value chain. You need a certain set of critical materials, and they was mentioned here before, and I know that people here are very interested in hearing about it, that are needed to keep the input and the value chain going. And I would like to ask you, what do you think that could be the biggest challenges in deployment for the Latin American continental or islands regarding the critical materials? What's the stance that we could take to ensure that we have a stable source of the materials, which in turn becomes the stable source of the solar panel, of the wind turbines, etc.? I went to the hard questions now, sorry.
No, I think that there's one big challenge that's obvious is that the integrated refining and value chain is not in the region, even though 60% of the lithium reserves, copper, etc., are here in the region. The integration on refining is not necessarily here, and it's not necessarily creating local jobs. Well, Chile does have quite a bit, but it's not the same in the region. So I think that going back to people, focusing on people and focusing on local employment, I think it's very important. But I wanted to pick up on the resilience because we've been working as UNDP in the region, trying to help decentralize solutions. So the battery solutions are very important for decentralized. So we have some examples in Uruguay and Dominican Republic, for example, where we are supporting the battery solutions for this decentralization that also supports resilience. We are also doing studies on climate change so that also you can predict what could be the needs in terms of climate change and what can be the risks, so you can analyze the risks and the needs. But also what I think it's super important that we have been doing is resilience is also when it impacts and the grid is not working, when the infrastructure is not working and it's not there, you need to rebuild, right? So in that moment, what do? You need adaptive social protection for the people that are impacted. And you have also insurance. So we were working on those two things, on adaptive social protection and insurance for that moment where you have an impact in your line or your service where you cannot reach people. So I think that thinking broadly also as a country on what is that you're going to do when the hurricane hits or when the flood hits. Here, for example, when there were some rains, was last year or this year, I can't remember, last year where people stayed, what they wanted most was communication, was what's happening, when are you going to reconnect? So I think that there are some also some things that you can do that are not necessarily only on infrastructure, that you can help resilience on people.
On the value chain, but also how do you involve the people in the process of connecting energy, which also connects to how do you democratize energy, how do you manage to do this distributed energy. Felipe? And
Yeah, at least from our perspective, there are several things that have to be managed in order to make the value chain locally. The first thing that we have observed during, let's say, the last 9 years is that the capacity building is crucial for make it possible to exploit the local resources that we have. As she said, getting the raw materials and transforming it in something that could be useful for example, for making solar panels or these kind of things. The other thing is really think about the critical materials and the possibilities that we have. For instance, since in our company we cover the whole value chain of the solar energy or the photovoltaic energy, we are thinking on different concepts of modules that have more, let's say, copper instead of silver, because here we don't have silver, but we have copper. And we can use it for new modules and, let's say, Chilean copper for Chilean modules for the energy transition of the Chilean mining, for instance. Yeah, it's very utopical, but yeah, you can think about it.
yep. I would like to piggyback a bit, and here I'm going to butcher this name, but it's Sujit Nair. Okay, thank you. Because you mentioned the capacity building, and one of the exemplary examples of an exemplar has been India's recent development of the full value chain for solar. And I would like to know if you would have a specific comment on how has India managed to tackle this issue of critical materials on their own value chain, trying to bring this resilience in the solar industry.
Great, thank you for the opportunity, and you did get my name right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. No, absolutely. I think one of the things that India looks at from a self-reliance as an economy and as for businesses in the economy is to make most of what we already have. So things that we are trying to do is to build a lot of circularity into things like battery. So we are creating digital public infrastructure around things like battery provenance and battery passports so that we are able to recover more and more of that and drive the utilization of those assets that are probably sometimes imported from other countries to be used effectively. In terms of creating large-scale supply chain provenance with digital is an effort that we are doing. So I represent a lot of that work where we do a lot of digital public infrastructure work in the area of energy. But a few other points I just want to talk about is that, interestingly in India, the unused home inverters, if you were to accumulate all of them together, there probably are more than the installed capacity of big generators in India. So the question is, when you have more and more of these fragmented behind-the-meter energy resources, be it batteries and solar, is there a way to virtualize and unify them and utilize what we already have as we start augmenting capacity? And this seems to be a problem that we see, especially in countries where populations are scarcely spread and you don't have the huge infrastructure to set up grids, physical grids. So we are looking at a lot of behind-the-meter rooftop solarization, not just for self-use, but use those idle capacities efficiently for collective shared use using digital public infrastructure. Just to give you a few examples, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is by a state itself is about 200 million people in one state, the state utility there has put forth, along with the state regulator, a regulation to allow you to sell your excess solar, not back to the utility, but to your neighbors, to your peers. So we do with digital public infrastructure, with digital infrastructure, we are able to facilitate a low tension, a distribution peer-to-peer energy market where I can sell my 5 units of extra energy solar generated to somebody within the region, not necessarily back to the grid, actually back to the utility. One, utility does not want to buy the energy with their scarce cash flow in the first place. Two, they don't want to buy the energy during solar hours, they rather take it in the night. So you have a situation where community is buying energy among themselves, literally like a shared economy for energy. And this creating a whole new market innovation where now you have battery operators offering decentralized battery energy storage systems to get into this market, buy this solar energy, and sell it back to the utility for the duck curve in the night. So there is a whole new way of creating that resilience and efficiency by just making use of the available resources. And that's what digital infrastructure can unlock more than, of course, the physical infrastructure is needed, but once you have them, and once you have them scattered, the reducing the cost of discovery, transaction, and reliability. Digital public infrastructure is showing us that way. I can probably talk about it later, but I just want to give you a few glimpses of the possibilities with digital.
Okay, thank you. Like, there's two big ideas. One is the, okay, critical materials. We're talking about some scarcity of our own resources, but also how do we tackle the reuse and recycling of our own already on disuse assets. So I'll take back the conversation to my panel. So Daniel, I know that you were David.
Yeah, I would like to just add something on that cable. First of all, I would guess that India has something that most of us don't have, which is a huge national market. I think that's a very important thing to localize your supply chain. But in terms of the energy community, this is a really interesting fact because especially implementing these solutions does not require any changes in law. So, for example, we're implementing right now a pilot project, which energy community, which does exactly that. So there are about 20 households, which everybody has solar system plus battery. They have one and one only connection to the grid, which is a shared connection. And internally, we are with basically software generating this peer-to-peer market where they sell the energy higher to their neighbor than they would to the grid, while the neighbor buys the energy at a cheaper price than you would actually buy from the grid. So you're really using these opportunities, and you could do that in community much bigger and just using the grid basically as a backup in terms of resilience for the community. And it's actually quite easy to implement today.
If I can just add, I think that's a brilliant point. Fellow colleague from the CEO Caucus has mentioned. So how do you hyper-localize the energy, security, reliability, and resilience with the community participating with their used assets and creating this little utility to cost of solar energy arbitrage as a way to create a shared economy? It checks multiple boxes, including local community resilience to any sort of climate events. With battery and solar, I see battery and solar as the smartphone of the energy economy in some sense. It kind of unlocks. I mean, there was a time when we were buying big servers and big computation. Today, a mobile phone has more power than what NASA used to send a person to the moon for 50 years ago. So with that miniaturization of energy resources and putting it in the hands of people, and just finding a nice little digital infrastructure of integrating them, can figure out, I think it gives a pathway, which is what India is trying to do with India Energy Stack, a very clear pathway for sustainable energy resilience at a community level. And then community, and country is just a network of these communities coming together at some sense. This is adding resilience to the big scale generation and transmission that anyway the country would build at some point and continue to build. So this combination is a very important one to look at as we build resilient and secure energy infrastructure at a population scale.
Absolutely.
And the population could be as small as an island. Sorry.
Absolutely, Mr.
We have a joke here in Chile that says that 9 out of 10 natural disasters choose Chile as its final destination. So I think it's very important. Resilience is a very important subject. And what we have seen at the most of the electric energy outage comes because the distribution network is not well fitted for facing today's challenges. Distribution network was built to bring energy from large scale to consumers, and now what we are seeing is that distribution networks must become bidirectional or multi-directional. That means that they must allow energy flows in multiple directions. And the traditional Chilean, at least Chilean regulation, was built thinking that money flows from customers to large companies. And what we've been talking this morning is right the opposite. Now money can flow at any directions. Peer-to-peer solar technology and solar model business innovation, I think it's the future. And for doing so, you need to put on top of the physical infrastructure of energy, you need to create a digital infrastructure. And when you create that digital infrastructure, that will transform the energy business. Just like digital infrastructure transform taxi business, hotel businesses, and it will transform energy business. And what we have seen in Chile is most of large-scale companies are still stuck in the old paradigm. And what we are seeing is that perhaps in the near future, we are going to see a new rise of businesses, a new rise of business opportunity, a new rise of companies that may somehow transform and jeopardize the traditional energy business. So I think that's something that we have to take into account when we move forward in this energy transition from the old days energy paradigm to the new days solar-driven energy transition.
Thank you very much. And you have made this perfect segue for the final topic, and the topic that has been highly anticipated before the session is the digital transformation. While we were talking about energy transformation, we saw the benefits in resilience, we saw the benefits in social inclusion, but as you have mentioned, it's written all over it, the digital transformation, and you have mentioned a lot of the digital infrastructure. And I would like to touch base a bit with you first. How can we understand? Do we have a common agreement of what do you consider that would be building digital infrastructure for a country? Sorry, the word is super hard. But could we take just a small step into try to find an agreement? What is digital infrastructure for this transition? And how can we actually build it, or how is it actually being built in the country?
So this is something that cannot be addressed in just a couple of lines, definitely not, but I will give you an example. So digitalization in a company that have multiple, so we are working in the O&M business, in the operation and maintenance of solar farms. The way that we use it, and this is just one point, one touch point, we use real-time information from all the sites, from all different parts of each of the site in case of the utility, and from the whole site if it is a distributed generation. We do a real-time injection and to see which is the soiling on each of the parts of the site. We do in parallel economic analysis on how much it will cost to clean all the sites. In the solar industry, one of the biggest what we consume is for cleaning the panels is almost maybe 20% of the whole OPEX on an annual basis. So we do an analysis on how much it will cost, and then an analysis of how much money are we losing because of that soiling. The soiling is going up, 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 to a point where it is economically makes sense to clean it. So we are doing this on a real time, on a daily basis, on each of the sites. And by doing that, then we also can predict on when to call. And then that means that on the logistics point of view, our cleaning team will be ready just right. They need to start linking. By doing that, we use the digitalization in order to reduce the OPEX to generate as much as we can and to optimize the generation of energy, which is ultimately what we all want in this room.
Yep.
On the topic of digital infrastructure, I definitely want to talk about digital public infrastructure, DPI, that I think we've been talking about as a G20 announcement that India hosted as presidency 2 years ago, and then the world has recognized. I understand from the Secretariat that I may have an opportunity to make a small presentation, maybe a little after lunch, so probably I'll reserve my detailed comments to that. But if I were to just extend the conversation here, so digital infrastructure, of course, people can talk about right from our IoT sensors to apps to compute and servers, and all of that is infrastructure. But it's important to recognize that we are looking at a very, very complex systems like energy and energy. I think the energy infrastructure is probably the most complex infrastructure humanity has ever built. But when you're looking at digital for that, it's important to look at digital public infrastructure. If I were to take a very simple analogy, I know digital public infrastructure, that's 3 words and quite a mouthful. But if I were to take a very simple analogy, today if you're a car manufacturer, you would set up infrastructure of yourself, like your plants, your supply chain, whole lot of things for component manufacturers, everything. But no matter how big a car manufacturer you are, you still need the public infrastructure of roads. Imagine if you had no roads in your country and you want to sell a Ferrari. What is the cost of a Ferrari, or what is the cost of a bus? So that's where shared common public infrastructure like roads and electricity is how the economy has built sustainable growth for the whole of humanity. In the digital world, unfortunately, we have been building digital infrastructure in silos without building those digital road specific. India has been able to demonstrate that if you build shared digital infrastructure, a bit like internet, we probably didn't build any digital public infrastructure beyond internet as a humanity. But if you build digital public infrastructure like Pix in Brazil or UPI in India, which does 18 billion transactions a month, today I can make a $2 loan because of UPI. And in 2 minutes for a very, very small artisan who needs that money for that day. So digital public infrastructure as a common digital rail that public and private can innovate on top of it to unlock value is the need of the hour. It is even more so in the area of energy, because energy is a very, very complex act of coordination. Distributors, transmission, generators, and now behind the meter solar and batteries coming in, it's a complex coordination problem. If you don't have a common digital infrastructure to do 2 things, very, very reliable trusted flow of information, reliable trusted form of energy, demand and supply, and reliable and trusted information about where the capacities to store, generate, and transmit has to be built. If all those coordination cannot happen today, we are creating probably smart isolated systems, but collectively it's becoming totally brittle, especially with demand going up, electrification happening across all industries. I think there is a very, very clear argument for why you need common digital infrastructure actually to protect the investments private companies, utilities, and governments are making, whether it's in adoption of AI or anything. And it's very powerful. And I think that's where we think the need for digital public infrastructure is important, and think of it like the digital roads that I think the grid desperately needs right now. I could probably talk about it later, but I just thought I'll give you a little bit of that, a teaser before I think why this conversation is important.
And I will ask, because we're very short on time, but I really need to ask, put the voice on you, the caucus from here, from Latin America. What do you think are the current drivers and inhibitors, or potential inhibitors and drivers of the current digital infrastructure transition for a more digitalized industry? Still have like a minute left, so let's use it.
Well, I think that energy and digital infrastructure are deeply interrelated. In Chile, when we have the blackout in February this year, after 4 hours of blackout, we start running out of communications. In Spain, that happened immediately. When they had the blackout, the cell phones stopped working immediately. So that means that communication infrastructure needs energy. We have talked this morning about how artificial intelligence may support the rise of new business models and the inclusion of more and more people in the energy world. But in order to the AI to work, they need energy, and they're going to need huge amount of cheap energy. Otherwise, artificial intelligence won't be able to develop. So the digital world needs the energy world, and the energy world will need digital world. Are two interrelated businesses, sectors, and may have a huge impact on the quality of life of all of us. So I think it's a very important matter to start thinking about these two sectors are joint sectors, and we have to deal with their challenges together.
Now, just to put one point extra also on the fragmentation, I think that thinking as systems is super important, but not only to focus on fragmentation, but to focus on also the decentralization, because that's the other side. When you don't want to fragment and collect and centralize too much, that doesn't work. I'm going to give you a very quick example. I was last week in Araucanía, in the mountains. The roads there are horrible. There's no phone connection. We were heating with wood, and there was a generator for the electricity. But there was Starlink. We had perfect connection. So I think that we need now to change the system and start thinking that the decentralization can be, and the decentralization of internet or of technology is already here. So we need to think also of how do we decentralize energy and bring this closer to people.
Thank you very much for your answer and all your answers, and for chiming in with your intelligence from an experience and insights from India. We have spoke about how solar energy became something that's natural, and it naturally began with battery systems, and it had brought several issues. Now you see that the green transition is extremely complex, and we just barely dipped our toes in the water on the subject of this. I want to thank you very much for your deep insight and the ideas that have been brought upon. I hope that this conversation can last for several years and we can actually evolve the conversation, not have the same one at any moment. I would like to give an applause to the panel of CEOs and I'll leave the speaker to the next one who's managing the agenda. Thank you.